Hey there, we're going to talk about an integrated amp today, the Linear Tube Audio Z40. So I have had in the back of my house, my office area, my music studio area, a secondary system where for a very long time I've been running through a Marantz 2238B receiver that has been with me since I turned probably 14, 15 years old, a very long time, decades. That receiver served me well. I had it recapped once about probably a little less than 10 years ago, but a few years ago, it just started exhibiting some distortion on some channels, some anomalies, volume started to get kind of wonky. And having recapped it once and knowing how old it was, I thought, hey, this is probably the time to move on to something different. So choices were in front of me, and this seemed to be a good time to think about, do I go solid state again, which is what the Marantz was, or might this be the time to move to a tube system, which I've been hearing about for a very long time. And tubes have intrigued me. I've been to a few audio shows over the last couple of years, listened to a lot of systems, so that was helpful. I had narrowed down a selection to 2 units. One would have been a solid state Yamaha AS2200, and the other one ended up being the Linear Tube Audio. And there was a few choices there. There was the 10 watt system, the 40 watt system. I think there was even one in the middle. But I was really looking for something that was going to work for my needs. I've got some specific needs, which I'll go through, and hopefully it's going to be understood why the Linear Tube Audio made sense for me. But thought we would just give an overview of it from a user's perspective. I know there's some videos out there that do go into the technical aspects of the amp. I'm not a technician, I'm not an audiologist, a physicist, so the spectrographs and waveforms and all that stuff, I don't have any of that here. This is just somebody who listens to music, somebody who uses this kind of product, how it works for me, and maybe this will be helpful for you. So the first thing I was looking for was inputs and specific types of inputs. I'm going to go through how I have my receiver set up, what I have running through it, and maybe that may make sense in terms of why this ended up being a choice for me. I think I have a very unique situation, but who knows, there might be some other musicians out there who have similar needs. So number one, I still listen to vinyl. I've got a collection of vinyl, so having a phono stage was important to me. There's the option on the Z40 to have a stage that offers inputs for both moving magnet and moving coil. I'm currently running a number of moving magnet cartridges, so that's the setup I'm starting with. But down the road, probably we'll move into some moving coil. But in any event, phono stage was important, so we checked the box on that with this amplifier. The second thing that was important to me, and this is becoming probably more rare of requests from people, but that would be a tape stage. So what I'm running through my tape stage is actually not a tape recorder, but a digital recorder. I've had the Korg MR1000 for probably well over a decade now, and it is my go-to recording device. It processes sound in high resolution PCM, but it also records in DSD, both at the regular rate as well as a double speed rate. And whenever I'm ripping vinyl and making safety copies of vinyl recordings or old reel-to-reel recordings, cassette recordings, what have you, those almost always go to DSD through the MR1000. I also run a podcast with my wife. It's the Places Where We Go travel podcast, and all of the audio for that runs initially through the Korg MR1000. So that tape input was super important to me, and that's one of the types of inputs that I was having trouble finding on competing units. The Yamaha was one of the ones that did have that, but another opportunity for the Z40 to check the box on that requirement for me. Now, one thing I will say about the tape stage, because I just bumped into this the other day, sometimes when I have something dubbing into the recorder, I'll set it up and then I'd like to turn the sound down while I'm doing other stuff. And what I noticed was it seems that as long as the volume on the Z40 is at 1 or higher, everything is fine. But when I turned the unit's volume down to 0, then it stopped outputting sound to my recording device. And it wasn't, I guess first I thought, well, maybe it was actually sending the sound based on the level that I had dialed in on the volume knob, but it actually seemed to be 1 or higher, it would send the output at the regular signal, and at 0 it would stop. So that's just something I think to be aware of. Again, I just noticed this the other day when I was recording something into the unit. So other than that, the tape stage has been really nice. The other things that I run into the inputs that are on the Z40, I have a TAC DAC, which I probably listen to music through the majority of the day when I'm in my studio working. The unit that I have is the USB audio DAC. It's the UD501. I think this one might be discontinued at this point. I think TAC has a more up-to-date DAC, but I've been really happy with that. The other thing that I like about that unit is it also processes DSD. And since I'm recording DSD through the Korg recorder, I can listen back to those files in native DSD through the DAC. So that's super. One of the other inputs that I use on the Z40, I use for tape recorders and tape playback machines. So I've just finished with an older Akai reel-to-reel deck, dubbing the last of the reel-to-reels that I have. So that's been moved out of the studio space, and that's been replaced with a Nakamichi. I had to go check the unit. So that's been replaced with the Nakamichi LX5 cassette deck, and I've got a stack of old cassette tapes that I'm going through and salvaging those and archiving those to the digital recorder. So that's one of the inputs that I'm using. This clip is from another day because I have changed one aspect of my setup with the Z40. So when I had my Marantz, I tried to have a feed of my Hammond organ into that, and the only way to get that in there was to run a line from the headphone output of the Hammond into the RCA inputs, and that just it just didn't work. Very distorted, and I'm sure there's a technical reason why that didn't work. The one thing I like about the Z40, or another thing I like about the Z40, I like so many things about it, is it does have a pair of XLR inputs. And so what I'm able to do now is from the Hammond organ, I can run it into this unit. So this is my RME Babyface Pro. It has XLR out on here. So I could run it through this unit, XLRs out of this into the Z40. And it's nice to have that extra flexibility. So, I can run so many things through the Z40, and this is just one extra input that just allows me to do my musical work here without a separate amplifier, a separate unit. And the sounds that come out of the Z40 when I'm, feeding that through it, either directly or running it through my Hoptwork software, just sounds amazing. So that's how I'm using the XLR inputs on the Z40. Back to my initial review. The other thing that I have available is on my MacBook, I do run certain music software where I'm able to play certain programs from my keyboards. One of those programs I use is a pipe organ app called Hoptwork, where when I hook up the Hammond XK5, I can bring up emulations of phenomenal pipe organs. The quality is beyond anything that you get in some of the mainstream music creation software that's out there. be it from Native Instruments, that's the Contact program, even the full scale one, super popular with composers. But even that one, when it comes to pipe organs, there's very, very modest, very minimal sounds that are available. Hauptwerk opens up the world of the pipe organ. And so when I'm using that system, I'll have the MacBook close to the XK5, and then I run another line from the MacBook, the headphone out again, into the receiver. So that's a separate output, or a separate input rather, into the Z40. So I use two of the inputs dedicated for music creation. One that's always on from the organ, another one that when I hook up my MacBook and I want to get sound running through its sound card, then that'll process through the Z40 as well. And the last input that I use is for my Oppo Universal Disc Player. So I'm a huge fan of Super Audio compact discs. I've got just a whole bunch of SACD recordings. Now the SACDs, when they're processed, you're getting a DSD signal. It doesn't always mean that the source audio was recorded in DSD. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. It usually is recorded either in high-res wave or DSD and then converted into DSD. But the sound quality of a DSD recording to me is like it's the next best thing from listening to a source recording either on original tape or vinyl. And just a side note, there's times when I'm working back at the studio here, I've got the speakers behind me and I'm playing audio all day long. I stream music, it might be recordings that I've made, etc. Once in a while, there's a moment when I'm in my work and the sound grabs me where it has that element of live, an element of air, an element of you're present with the musicians. And the only time I get that sensation is either when vinyl is spinning on the turntable in the back there, or I've got just a great DSD recording. And so if it hasn't come across yet, super, super fan of DSD. I know some people say they can't hear a difference between that and PCM. Others say they can't hear a difference between high-res PCM and regular PCM. For me, nothing turns my head like DSD other than great vinyl or great original tapes, which I also have a number of available to me. Also on the unit, there is a headphone or speaker toggle switch. So depending how you're listening, if you want to listen through your headphones or listen through speakers, there's a little toggle switch on the unit. So that's there. I've had this unit now back here for a few weeks, so I've lived with it for a while, and I thought I would do that before giving an opinion about it. And I'll be honest, when I first got it and first set it up, I didn't really notice anything remarkably different to what I was accustomed to. And I will say, I usually listen to music in this space at very modest volume. And after playing a few things and after a few days, I started goosing the volume a little bit more. And that's when this unit just became alive, and it really started to wow me. And I've noticed, for me, I think the sweet spot on the Z40, and it is particular to the volume that's being driven out of it. In my space, with the speakers that I'm running, which are some modest JBLs at the moment, that might be the next thing that gets modified. But I find when the volume on the Z40 gets around 40 and higher, everything just blossoms. The sound becomes full, it becomes immersive. And one of the interesting things that I had happen, that it was one of those head-turning moments. I was editing a podcast a couple of weeks ago, and that was running through the Z40. The volume was, again, up in that space around the 40 level or so. And while we've been doing the podcast, I think we're in our third year now. And so I'm editing those files almost every single week. I have never heard spoken word sound so amazing and so impressive as it has through the Z40 system. Now, I know most people aren't going to be listening through spoken word as something that they listen to on something like this, but it was just one of those examples of, something that I wouldn't have expected to turn my head, and wow, did it ever. And not only for spoken word, but music. I listen mostly to, probably 80% of the day, it's classical music that's coming through the system, some jazz, 10 to 20% probably rock, pop, etc. But so far the unit has just been absolutely fantastic for day-to-day listening. The other thing that I'm running through it, as you may have guessed with the description of the music setup, is as I'm composing music, my tracks, the compositions, I'm doing auditioning through the system. So there's a lot of listening to my own music as well. A couple of other things that we'll talk about with this unit. So when I was doing my research, one of the things that people in the reviews of the Linear Tube Audio integrated amps seemed to have a complaint about was the remote control that comes with it. So there is an Apple remote control that comes with the unit. It's fairly simple. And I haven't revisited what it is about this thing that people don't like, but I've got to say, when I'm sitting in my space, you can't see it, but my computer monitor is right in front of me right there. Speakers are behind me, and this thing is so convenient. If I just need to change volume, instead of like when I had the Marantz unit, I'd have to get up, go flip the volume knob, not the end of the world, but with this unit, I just flip around in my chair, go up or down really quick, and this is really convenient. You can also change the inputs from one to something else by flipping one of these buttons. So while a number of people have not been fans of this, and again, there's some quirk about this that doesn't work for some people, I really like this, and I think this is a really nice feature. I use it every day. Lastly, I mentioned that the Linear Tube Audio Z40 amp is a tube amplifier, and one of the realities of living with a tube system is at some point tubes reach end of life and need to be replaced. The way that this particular unit is engineered and architected, it supposedly has a lower heat property that affects the tubes to the point that the tubes are expected to last somewhere around 10,000 hours. So it will be years before the tubes need to be replaced in the unit. So that's an overview of the Linear Tube Audio Z40 integrated amp. Not a technical overview, but just a user overview. Hope this is helpful to you. I have zero affiliation with Linear Tube Audio. The only connection that I have is I purchased the unit. I'm living with the unit as my sound source in this secondary space I have in my house. I have a main system in the front part of my house, but absolutely thrilled with this unit. So if you're thinking about moving into the space, if you've been intrigued with the Z40 or any of the other Linear Tube Audio products, for what it's worth, this is one person who took the plunge and has been very, very pleased and happy with the Z40. So with that, thanks for watching on my channel. It's usually a mix of things. It could be a discussion about gear. Sometimes there's something that's being played on the organ or the piano, so you never know, but it's always something music related. Thanks for stopping by and watching, and I hope this was helpful to you.